Sarah Mitchell walked through the quiet streets of Dayton, Ohio, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The morning was crisp, a faint chill lingering in the autumn air, and the faint rustle of leaves accompanied her steps. She enjoyed these early hours when the world seemed slower and softer before students, traffic, and obligations intruded. To anyone observing, she was just a simple woman, a history professor at a small university, known for her approachable demeanor, warm smile, and the meticulous care with which she graded essays. Her apartment reflected her life, cozy, orderly, filled with texts on American history, a small collection of novels, and neatly framed photographs of family and friends. There was an old photograph tucked in a drawer, barely visible, showing a younger Sarah in military-style clothing, a serious expression she didn't recognize now. She never looked at it, and the memory it stirred she quietly suppressed. A small lockbox under her bed contained similar relics from a past she had buried deep, a past she had thought erased. Today, however, her life was set to change, or at least, that was what the universe seemed to hint at, though she didn't realize it yet. She was preparing for a flight to Washington, D.C. to attend a historical conference on American intelligence agencies. Nothing about this trip suggested anything extraordinary. She packed her laptop, lecture notes, and a few professional outfits. Her schedule was mundane: seminars, networking dinners, and perhaps a visit to the. As she drove to the airport, the faint roar of distant jets barely registered in her mind, though a subtle, inexplicable shiver ran down her spine. It was an echo of something she couldn't quite place, a sensation long buried beneath years of civilian life. The radio murmured background news, local politics, and weather updates. Sarah's thoughts wandered to her students, latest essays, the upcoming grading deadlines, and the peaceful routine she had built for herself. For all appearances, she was ordinary, predictable, perfectly ordinary. At the airport, she moved with calm efficiency, checking in her luggage and navigating security lines with practiced ease. Other travelers seemed rushed, irritated by delays or inconvenienced by luggage restrictions, but Sarah remained unfazed. She sipped her coffee slowly, observing strangers with quiet curiosity. The young woman ahead of her fumbled with her boarding pass, the elderly man behind her hummed softly, and a father attempted to calm a restless child. Life moved in its usual chaotic rhythm, and Sarah felt removed, a quiet observer of ordinary humanity. As she reached the gate, she noticed a retired military officer waiting nearby. His uniform had long been replaced by civilian attire, but his posture and demeanor carried unmistakable precision. He glanced around, noting aircraft movements with an almost instinctive understanding. Sarah's gaze met his briefly, and a flicker of recognition, almost imperceptible, passed between them. She quickly looked away, focusing instead on her notes. Above, somewhere unseen, military aircraft sliced through the skies. Jets so fast, so precise, they left trails in her subconscious awareness. She boarded the plane, settling into her window seat, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Her life, simple and unremarkable, had been carefully constructed over years, a life she thought she had earned. But somewhere in the distant hum of engines or the faint memory triggered by a call sign she would soon hear, fragments of a hidden past stirred. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet history professor, the ordinary woman of Dayton, Ohio, had a past that was anything but ordinary. And to her, the world was about to recognize her again. Sarah settled into her window seat, the hum of the plane beneath her a familiar comfort. She placed her laptop on the tray table, opening it to review lecture notes for the conference in Washington, D.C. around her. Passengers chatted quietly, adjusted their seats, or scrolled on devices, immersed in their own worlds. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and plastic, engines vibrating softly underfoot. She sipped her water, eyes occasionally glancing out the oval window, observing clouds shifting slowly against the morning light. Everything seemed ordinary, just as she had planned. Across the aisle sat a retired Air Force officer, his hair silver and neatly combed, posture rigid despite the casual jacket he wore. He glanced out the window with a practiced eye, nodding aircraft far above, seemingly invisible to anyone else. Sarah's peripheral vision caught his gaze, and though she offered a polite nod, an uneasy memory stirred deep within her. Years ago, in a different life, she would have recognized every plane in the sky instantly, calculated speeds, altitudes, even potential maneuvers. She brushed it off, burying the feeling beneath her calm exterior. Moments later, a subtle tension rippled through the cockpit, faintly audible to the attentive ear. Air traffic control relayed what sounded like routine intercept instructions, though Sarah's instincts whispered otherwise. She sipped her coffee, trying to appear absorbed in her notes, yet her mind raced. The hum of engines, the precision of flight, the distant roar above, it all felt familiar, unsettlingly so. And then she heard it, faint but unmistakable, a call sign being repeated by pilots, low and clipped. Her breath caught. The name resonated, echoing from a past she had long tried to forget. She tightened her grip on her laptop, resisting the urge to glance toward the cockpit. Every fiber of her training, buried beneath years of civilian normalcy, stirred to life. Muscles she hadn't consciously used in years twitched instinctively. Her pulse remained steady, though adrenaline traced silent lines along her veins. She reminded herself quietly to breathe, to remain ordinary, to blend in. Passengers around her adjusted positions, chatted, laughed, completely unaware that the sky above contained more than just clouds and commercial air traffic. The retired officer shifted in his seat, clearly sensing something in the air. His eyes flicked to the window, scanning the sky with old instincts she could barely suppress. Sarah caught a glimpse of the F-22 Raptors in the distance, sleek silhouettes moving with terrifying precision, engines humming a controlled menace. Her stomach tightened. Though she appeared calm, her mind calculated every possibility: speed, trajectory, potential outcomes if the jets were hostile or if this was a test. Every scenario she ran through required split-second decisions she hadn't expected to face today. She recalled the countless simulations, the covert operations, the classified programs she had trained for years ago. Flying, surveillance, tactical analysis, skills now dormant, hidden beneath a facade of professor and small-town woman. The recognition of her name by the pilots, if that was indeed what she had heard, was impossible in a civilian world. Yet she had heard it unmistakably. She felt the old thrill, the silent understanding that her life was about to pivot sharply from ordinary to extraordinary. The plane leveled off, cruising at 30,000 feet, and passengers relaxed. Some reclined, some napped. Sarah's eyes, however, remained sharp, alert. The hum of engines, the chatter of the cabin, even the flickering lights above, all were background to the awareness she could not shake. A secret part of her, trained for danger, for high-stakes decisions, had awakened. She took another sip of water, a calm mask over a mind already in motion. The ordinary woman in the window seat was gone, replaced by someone with skills long hidden, someone about to be recognized by the world above. Above the clouds, 2 F-22 Raptors sliced through the sky with lethal precision. Pilots Lieutenant Mark and Captain Jenna Hayes adjusted their formation, unaware that routine intercept instructions would soon become anything but ordinary. Then over the secure channel, voice faltered as he repeated the words that would freeze them both. "Contact. Sarah Mitchell." The call sign echoed in their ears, reverberating through years of experience, training, and secrecy. Both pilots instinctively checked each other's reactions. Pale expressions mirrored disbelief. They had seen countless operations, flown countless missions, but her name, Sarah Mitchell, was supposed to be classified, erased from every file, every record. Inside the plane, Sarah sat composed, feigning focus on her laptop. Yet deep within, recognition stirred. She had trained for years under aliases and executing classified operations for programs she had long left behind. And now, a squadron of America's most elite fighters had been scrambled, responding to her very existence. Her heart remained calm, pulse steady. She had faced danger before, far more deadly than this, but nothing could have prepared her for recognition in such a public, controlled, and unexpected way. and Hayes continued their approach, unable to shake the disbelief gripping them. "Did you hear that correctly?" asked, voice low, almost a whisper, eyes scanning the Raptor instruments. Hayes' hand hovered over controls, still mid-adjustment, a rare tremor betraying her calm exterior. She's real," Hayes murmured. "Sarah Mitchell, the one from the Delta program. I thought she was gone." Their training screamed caution, but the implications froze them. The woman in the commercial jet below was not just a civilian. She was an operative whose existence was officially. Sarah, sensing the subtle tension, allowed herself the smallest smile. Her outward demeanor, calm, ordinary, almost fragile, hid decades of experience, skills honed in secrecy. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the cockpit overhead, noting the faint echo of her presence in the pilot's movements. Recognition was dangerous. It meant exposure, potential orders she couldn't ignore, and the sudden intrusion of a past she had meticulously avoided. Yet she did not panic. She adjusted her posture slightly, notebook closed, hands resting casually, a mask of normalcy perfected over years of deliberate practice. The passengers remained oblivious. They murmured about minor turbulence, a spilled coffee, and seat reclines, unaware that the airspace above contained tension greater than anything they could imagine. The retired officer seated across the aisle glanced out the window, sensing something unusual, though he did not, and could not know what he was witnessing. For him, it was instinct. For Sarah, it was familiar territory. Recognition by the world's most elite pilots was not new. It was a reminder of past life, skill, and the latent danger that came with being someone erased from the public eye. Inside her mind, Sarah ran calculations instinctively. The pilots had identified her. They were frozen, unsure how to proceed. Their hesitation was an opportunity. If she moved carefully, she could de-escalate, protect herself and the plane's passengers, and avoid unnecessary confrontation. Every muscle memory, every tactical response from years of covert training surfaced subtly beneath her calm exterior. The ordinary woman had vanished, replaced by an operative in control, observing, assessing, and planning her next move with quiet precision. Above, the F-22s lingered in formation, engines a muted hum of restrained power. And Hayes exchanged quick glances over their instruments, minds racing with questions. How could she be alive? Why was she on a civilian plane? And most importantly, could they trust their instincts, or were they witnessing a ghost from classified history? Sarah sipped her water, serene, calculating. She knew they were frozen by recognition, and she allowed the pause, letting them comprehend who she truly was. The moment stretched, tense yet controlled. Sarah Mitchell, historian, teacher, and quiet resident of Ohio, had become far more than anyone imagined. The ordinary world she inhabited below was about to collide with the extraordinary past hovering above, and both she and the pilots understood that nothing in the air, or on the ground, would ever be quite the same again. As the plane cruised steadily above the clouds, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself a brief mental retreat into memories she had long locked away. Her calm demeanor remained intact, a perfect mask for the passengers and crew, but behind her composed eyes, a storm of recollection surged. At 22, she had been recruited into a top-secret government program, one that promised to harness civilian talent for covert intelligence operations. It had been sudden, disorienting, thrilling, a life entirely removed from ordinary existence. The program demanded perfection. Sarah had been trained relentlessly in surveillance, cryptography, evasive maneuvers, and advanced combat tactics. Her instructors had pushed her beyond physical limits, her mind beyond comfort zones. Days blurred into nights of simulations, drills, and classified missions. She had flown experimental aircraft, learned to navigate hostile territory without detection, and mastered languages with uncanny speed. Every skill was honed with precision, every instinct sharpened for survival. She had become more than human, a ghost in the shadows, capable of feats ordinary civilians couldn't imagine. Even then, she had understood the cost. Personal connections were dangerous distractions. Emotions had to be controlled, vulnerabilities hidden. Sarah had watched colleagues falter under pressure, some disappearing from records entirely, swallowed by secrecy. She had survived not only because of skill, but because she understood discipline, patience, and the necessity of invisibility. The world outside the program did not exist. She was a phantom, moving through missions that never appeared in newspapers or archives. She was Sarah Mitchell, but only to herself. One particular mission haunted her still. Assigned to intercept a high-level operative trafficking sensitive intelligence, Sarah had flown alone in an unmarked jet, executing maneuvers that were precise to the second. Every decision had been calculated, every move rehearsed, every outcome predicted. She had succeeded, and in that success she had realized something crucial. Her life could never be ordinary. It had been thrilling, terrifying, intoxicating, but it had also demanded sacrifice. And so, when the program offered her a permanent assignment, she had refused. She had walked away, erasing herself from records, changing her name on official documents, and retreating into civilian life. Back in the present, the hum of engines and faint chatter from passengers pulled her partially back to reality. She glanced out the window, seeing the distant silhouettes of F-22s, elegant and lethal in formation. Recognition had happened. Pilots above knew her existence, and the program's erasure of her life had not been complete. A faint smile touched her lips. It was strange to feel that thrill again, that pulse of awareness that she was extraordinary, even if she appeared ordinary. She considered the implications carefully. Any sudden move, any sign of panic could trigger unnecessary escalation. The pilots above were skilled, disciplined, and cautious, but they were human. Recognition could lead to hesitation, doubt, or, worst-case scenario, an accident. Sarah needed control, precision, and calm. Her past had trained her for these moments, and now, decades later, that training reemerged naturally, without effort, without thought. Her mind shifted briefly to the passengers, oblivious to the tension in the skis. They saw her as just another woman on a commercial flight. No one knew that Sarah Mitchell had flown aircraft no one else could manage, had infiltrated operations no one else could comprehend, and had been erased from records to protect national security. And yet, above, the Air Force pilots knew. They froze, caught between disbelief and protocol, between awe and duty. Sarah sipped her water, letting her calm mask anchor her presence. The past and present coexisted in a delicate balance. She was ordinary again, for now, but the extraordinary never truly disappeared. The flight continued, routine in appearance, yet charged with the silent tension of recognition and unspoken history. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet historian, had become something far more complex, a living ghost of the nation's most secret operations, watching the skis, waiting, ready for what might come next. The plane jolted slightly as turbulence brushed its wings, though to Sarah Mitchell it was nothing unusual. Her fingers rested lightly on the tray table, but her eyes flicked toward the overhead bins, then out the window. Above, two F-22 Raptors moved into formation, engines humming with controlled menace. Their silhouettes were sharp against the clouds, and in the cockpit and haze exchanged quick glances, tension radiating from their posture. Recognition had frozen them, but duty demanded action. They had a civilian plane under their watch, and that civilian plane carried someone far more than ordinary. Air traffic control crackled through the cabin speakers, a tense message filtered by the flight crew. All pilots maintain position. Identify yourself, Ms. Mitchell. The words were casual, measured, but their weight was enormous. Passengers murmured uneasily, glancing around at cabin crew who repeated standard reassurances. Nothing to worry about, please remain seated. To them, it was a routine military escort, perhaps an overcautious maneuver, but Sarah's mind raced. The pilots above had her name, and that name was more than a label. It was history, skill, and lethal experience condensed into a single identity. Sarah straightened her posture, masking the surge of adrenaline. Her calm tone would guide the pilots, but every small decision mattered. One wrong word, one hesitant gesture could trigger panic, escalation, or worse. She sipped her water, voice steady, and said softly when prompted over the cabin intercom, "This is Sarah Mitchell, Commercial Flight 1127. How may I assist?" Her tone was casual, almost conversational, but it carried authority. An authority the F-22 pilots recognized instantly. And Hayes adjusted their positions, both conscious of protocol yet restrained by disbelief. The woman below them, the historian, the quiet professor, was the operative from top-secret programs erased from all records. They hovered, engines loud but measured, watching for any sign of threat. Sarah's posture, the calm in her gaze, even the casual movement of her hands, all indicated control, experience, and silently, a warning. She was not to be underestimated. She allowed the pause to stretch deliberately, letting them comprehend her composure. Then, speaking clearly and evenly, she provided instructions for minor adjustments in altitude to reduce wake turbulence over the plane. Every word, every suggestion, was technically correct but also subtly a reminder of her competence. The pilots absorbed it, astonished. They had seen combat, high-risk maneuvers, simulated crises and emergencies, but nothing prepared them for guidance from someone they had believed erased, someone whose very name carried forbidden weight. Inside the cabin, passengers remained oblivious. The hum of engines, the murmur of conversations, the occasional clatter of trays in the galley created a veneer of normalcy. Only Sarah knew the danger suspended just above the plane, the precise knowledge required to navigate it safely. Her thoughts ran through contingencies with the precision of decades-long training. She had survived missions where a single miscalculation meant death. Today she had civilians, a commercial flight, and two elite pilots frozen by recognition, all dependent on her calm, every small decision amplified. Minutes stretched like hours as the F-22s maintained formation, engines cutting sharply through the air, and Hayes exchanged subtle signals over secure comms, both astonished by the casual mastery of the woman below. Sarah's eyes flicked to the controls lightly in front of her, calculating positions, distances, trajectories in her mind. Though she appeared calm, her mind worked like a battlefield map, analyzing, predicting, and guiding. She was ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in reality, and the Raptor pilots could not deny it. Finally, she leaned back, sipping her water as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The F-22s shifted slightly, maintaining safe distance, both pilots shaken by awe and disbelief. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet woman in the window seat, had subtly reminded the military of her past mastery. Ordinary, they might have thought, but in those few minutes she had proven she was far beyond ordinary, and the sky itself bore witness. The wheels of the commercial plane screeched against the runway, tires gripping asphalt under the fading sunlight. Lights flashed, ground crews moved quickly, and a convoy of unmarked black SUVs waited near the tarmac. Sarah Mitchell exhaled slowly, maintaining the same calm she had exhibited throughout the flight, though her mind raced beneath the serene surface. The ordinary world she inhabited for decades had collided with her past in a sudden, unstoppable convergence. She knew that, for the next few hours, nothing would remain normal. Passengers clutched personal items, murmuring in confusion. Flight attendants moved efficiently, masking concern with rehearsed smiles, reassuring them that all was routine. To anyone else, the military presence seemed like overprecaution, perhaps a VIP escort or security exercise. But Sarah knew otherwise. Her name had triggered recognition, and she was about to confront a world she had carefully left behind. She adjusted her coat, her posture perfect, every motion precise yet casual. Two high-ranking officials approached as she stepped onto the tarmac. Both were in plain black suits, earpieces glinting subtly, faces unreadable but commanding. They greeted her with a formal nod, acknowledging her presence as something extraordinary yet restrained by protocol. "Ms. Mitchell," one said quietly, "we're pleased to see you. There's a matter that requires your expertise." Sarah met their gaze, expression neutral, masking the surge of adrenaline. She followed, walking with measured steps, aware of every movement, every shadow along the runway. Inside the convoy vehicles, the tension was palpable. The officials briefed her in hushed tones, revealing the threat she had anticipated. A cybersecurity breach targeting military infrastructure, potentially catastrophic, with airborne systems at risk. They stressed that only she possessed the unique combination of skills and classified knowledge required to neutralize the threat. Every instinct she had honed during covert training resurfaced. She analyzed the problem quickly, mentally rehearsing potential interventions, contingencies, and responses. Her life as a professor, her quiet Ohio existence, seemed a distant memory. She observed personnel coordinating over secure channels, calculating distances, system vulnerabilities, and timing. Every move was deliberate, and she spoke with a calm authority that impressed even the officials who had decades of experience. They were used to giving orders, issuing instructions, but she guided them with precision, quiet yet commanding, blending logic with instinctive understanding. In her presence, the crisis began to feel manageable, even though its stakes were enormous. Outside the vehicle windows, the commercial plane remained a silent witness, passengers unaware of the storm of classified strategy unfolding nearby. For them, life continued as ordinary, while the world's security balanced precariously on the competence of the woman they believed to be an unremarkable professor. Sarah's mind ran simulations, assessed risks, and prioritized actions. Her calm demeanor reassured the officials, pilots, and ground crew. Every instruction she gave was clear, concise, and unambiguous, a reflection of experience impossible to fake. The officials led her to a secure operations room. Monitors displayed feeds of networks, aircraft, and intelligence data streams. Sarah moved quickly, analyzing patterns, spotting vulnerabilities invisible to most trained eyes. She issued precise commands, advised pilots, and coordinated interventions that minimized risk and prevented escalation. Within minutes, potential chaos transformed into controlled mitigation. Her calm authority, cultivated through years of clandestine missions, radiated through the room. By the time the immediate threat was neutralized, Sarah Mitchell had reminded the military that the ordinary woman in the window seat was anything but ordinary. Passengers disembarked later, oblivious to the extraordinary series of events. And yet, Sarah's mind remained vigilant. She had returned briefly to the ordinary world, but the extraordinary had found her again, inescapable and undeniable. Sarah Mitchell stood in the secure operations room, the glow of monitors reflecting faintly in her eyes. Lines of data, aircraft trajectories, and network maps scrolled rapidly before her, a chaotic symphony only she could decode. The threat was clear. A sophisticated cyber attack was targeting critical military infrastructure, and airborne systems were at risk. Ordinary operators hesitated, analysts debated, and officers second-guessed themselves. But Sarah's mind moved with precision. Every calculation, every contingency, every possible outcome unfolded with clarity. She was no longer the quiet professor from Dayton. She was the operative once erased from the record. She spoke calmly, issuing instructions that cut through confusion. Initiate Protocol Delta 12. Isolate communications on channels Bravo 3 and synchronize backups immediately. Hayes, coordinate altitude adjustments to stabilize network link systems. I need continuous feedback. Her voice carried authority, unwavering yet measured. Even the most senior officials paused to absorb her words, realizing she was not merely providing guidance, she was orchestrating the solution. Her hands moved with practiced precision across keyboards and consoles, typing commands that would normally take teams of trained specialists hours to complete. And Hayes followed her instructions in the sky, adjusting the F-22s' positions with surgical precision. Every movement synchronized with her calculations. Sarah anticipated shifts in the threat patterns, predicting network intrusions before they could materialize. Her ability to process vast amounts of information, analyze trajectories, and make instant decisions astonished the military personnel watching. She had once trained to operate in hostile territory, alone or in small teams, relying on nothing but instinct and knowledge. That training now ensured the threat would be neutralized efficiently, with no margin for error. The cyber attack escalated briefly, systems blinking red as intrusions attempted to override safeguards. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer to the monitors, adjusting firewall protocols and redirecting data flow in real time. Her voice remained calm, giving instructions to operators who marveled at her composure. Patch Node 6 immediately. Initiate countermeasure sequence at coordinates 1728. Maintain line integrity. Alert backup teams. Keep civilian systems separate. Her words were precise, authoritative, and deliberate. Panic would have compromised the operation, but her calm anchored everyone around her. Minutes stretched, tension building with each passing second. Outside, the F-22s maintained formation, ready to intervene if the situation worsened. And Hayes could not hide their awe. The woman below them, the quiet professor, the unassuming traveler, was directing operations with the expertise of someone who had once managed crises far deadlier than this. Every action she took demonstrated flawless situational awareness, instant problem-solving, and a mastery of both technology and human coordination that few could rival. Finally, the breach was contained. Systems stabilized, intrusions neutralized, and airborne networks synchronized flawlessly. Operators exhaled, officers nodded, and the room relaxed slightly. Sarah leaned back, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. She had executed the plan with precision, protected the lives of civilians and military personnel alike, and demonstrated that the ordinary world she inhabited was inseparable from the extraordinary skills she had honed over decades. Even as the room settled, Sarah remained alert. She knew that her actions had ripple effects, that recognition by the F-22 pilots and military command meant her past could never fully remain hidden. Yet she allowed herself a small, private smile. The ordinary woman in the quiet Ohio town had just reminded the world and herself that she was far from ordinary. Her past, her skills, and her calm decisiveness had prevented disaster, and for now, the world could breathe again. Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the secure operations room into the late afternoon sunlight, her coat brushing gently against her arms. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and pavement, a reminder that she had been part of an extraordinary episode few could even imagine. Passengers from her flight were gone, oblivious to the high-stakes operation that had unfolded above their heads. Crew members waved, exhausted but smiling, and the retired officer across the aisle gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. To the world, Sarah was a quiet professor, a simple woman returning home, but beneath the surface, everything had changed. Her mind ran through the events with a measured calm. From the moment the F-22s intercepted her plane to the precise neutralization of the cyber attack, every action had been deliberate, controlled, and efficient. She had guided pilots, orchestrated network defenses, and managed a crisis that could have crippled critical military infrastructure. Yet outwardly, she appeared composed, ordinary, unremarkable. She had mastered the art of being extraordinary without anyone noticing. Every smile, every casual movement, every conversation was layered with subtle authority, invisible to those who did not know her past. Back in Dayton, Ohio, she returned to her modest apartment, the familiar scent of books and coffee greeting her. She unpacked her bag, carefully placing her laptop on the desk as if nothing unusual had occurred. The photographs on her shelves, the stack of grading papers, even the garden outside her window, all were reminders of the life she had fought to protect. Quiet, ordinary, safe. And yet a part of her remained alert, her senses still tuned to patterns, risks, and contingencies. The extraordinary could never be fully left behind. Sarah prepared dinner, moving with deliberate, unhurried motions. She flipped a pan, chopped vegetables, and stirred a simmering sauce, every action grounded in routine. Her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague about the conference, mundane questions about schedules and seminar topics. She smiled, replying casually, her words ordinary, controlled. And yet in her mind she analyzed, calculated, remembered. The F-22 pilots, the cyber attack, the secure room full of officials, they were echoes of a world she could never fully leave behind. Later she sipped her tea on the balcony, watching the orange and pink sky over the Ohio skyline. A low-flying jet streaked across the horizon, the faint roar catching her attention. Sarah's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Recognition, protocol, and authority had frozen even the most experienced pilots above her plane. And now, years later, the extraordinary had intersected with her ordinary life again. For her, ordinary and extraordinary were inseparable threads, woven into a single identity no one could fully see. She returned to grading essays, her voice soft during lectures, her presence calm in classrooms. Students laughed, asked questions, and shared stories, unaware that their professor had just orchestrated a crisis that could have crippled national security. Sarah listened, guided discussions, and maintained patience, her extraordinary training subtly informing her every reaction, every gesture. The world assumed she was simple, ordinary, quiet, but she carried a depth of experience, skill, and history no one could measure. Before bed, she locked the apartment and glanced at the drawer holding photographs of a past carefully hidden. The lockbox beneath contained reminders of her other life, missions, exercises, simulations. She touched it lightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and quiet respect. The world was safe, at least for now. Her ordinary life resumed, but Sarah Mitchell, the simple professor, knew that extraordinary could never be erased. It was a part of her, quiet but eternal, waiting for the next time it was needed. As the city lights flickered on, Sarah stood by the window, gazing at the horizon. The faint hum of distant aircraft reminded her that the skies, the world, and her past were never far away. Ordinary, she allowed herself to think, was a choice, but extraordinary was innate. And for Sarah Mitchell, both would coexist quietly, powerfully, endlessly.